There are two numbers that decide whether retirement feels impossible or weirdly manageable. And no, it's not the number HR plugged into that little calculator. It's not the neat little target your advisor scribbled on a napkin either. It's two very specific checkpoints hiding inside the whole retirement game. And the second one? Yeah, that one exposes something the financial industry really does not love explaining in plain English. Because once you understand it, a lot of the usual retirement fear starts to look convenient. Not for you, for them. Most people can spend decades saving, grinding, contributing, stressing, and still never hear where the actual finish lines are. Not because they're lazy, because nobody told them the map had two finish lines. So let me give it to you straight. This video is about $2 amounts that change everything. One changes how your money grows. The other changes how your money behaves after you stop working. And both are very different from the numbers people keep repeating like they're gospel. The old advice isn't wrong because it's complicated. It's wrong because it was built for a different era. And a lot of people make a lot of money keeping it that way. I want to use one mental model for this whole thing. Escape velocity. Yeah, like a rocket. At the beginning, rockets are basically fighting for their life. They burn through fuel, they move slowly, and from the ground, it looks like nothing is happening. Then, at a certain point, the whole situation changes.
Gravity loses its grip.
Momentum takes over. The same fuel suddenly does way more work. That's exactly how compound growth behaves. Below a certain threshold, your portfolio is powered mostly by you. Above it, the money starts doing more of the heavy lifting. You're still involved, obviously, but the engine changes. That first threshold is $250,000, not $100,000. I know. You've heard the first 100,000 is the hardest line 1,000 times. And look, that quote came from a real place. In 1994, $100,000 had a lot more punch than it does now. A comfortable retirement cost around $500,000. A house was roughly $154,000. A new car was about $15,000. Since then, inflation has chopped the buying power of that milestone to pieces. So, if we're being honest, in 2026, the old first $100,000 idea is off by a mile. The real escape velocity number is closer to $250,000. And the reason matters. Let's say you're putting away $12,000 a year, about $1,000 a month, and getting around 7% a year, which is in line with long-term stock market history. At that pace, it takes about 7 years to reach $100,000. And here's the part that stings a little. Often 80% of that growth came from your own contributions. Only about 20% came from returns. So at that stage, you are the engine. Then you keep going. From $100,000 to $200,000 takes about 5 more years. But now the mix is shifting. Your own contributions are still important, but returns are starting to carry more of the load. Then you hit $250,000. And from there, the next $100,000 takes less than 4 years. That's the flip. That's the moment where your money starts working harder than you are. That's escape velocity. No confetti, no fireworks, no little banner from your brokerage app. Just a quiet shift in the physics of wealth. And most people miss it completely. Let me make this real. Picture a guy named Marcus, construction supervisor in Ohio. Makes about $75,000 a year. Been putting money into his 401k for 16 years. Automatic contributions. Company match. Doesn't get cute. Doesn't gamble. Last he checked, he had around $230,000. And Marcus feels behind. He looks at that balance and thinks, this is not retirement money. This is maybe I can survive long enough not to be a burden money. So he starts thinking about cranking up contributions. Maybe a side job. Maybe more sacrifice. More hustle. More years of saying no to everything fun. But here's the wild part. Marcus is basically right on the doorstep of escape velocity. and he has no idea. At $250,000 with a 7% return, even if he never added another dollar, the account could grow to $500,000 in about 10 years. But he's not going to stop contributing. If he stays the course, he could be looking at around $800,000 by his early 60s. And that second number, $800,000, that's where the whole retirement conversation changes again. Hold that thought. I'm coming back to it. First, let's talk about the trap that ruins a lot of plans before the math even gets a chance to work. Because people think the big problem is not saving enough. Sometimes that's true, but way more often, the real problem is panic. Once you cross that first threshold, the worst thing you can do is let fear drive the wheel. A portfolio that's finally gaining momentum can get wrecked by one emotional move at exactly the wrong time. Vanguard has shown over and over that investors who trade emotionally during market drops tend to lock in losses and miss the rebound. In 2022, when the S&P 500 was down about 18%, a lot of investors turned temporary pain into permanent damage by selling low and buying back higher. And here's why this matters even more. Once you're around $250,000, because the numbers feel real now. A 10% drop on $250,000 is $25,000. That's not abstract. That's a car, a kitchen remodel, a year of travel, a chunk of your future. So people freak out. They do something safe that ends up being expensive. That's the psychological danger zone. Now let's get to the second number, $800,000. Not a million, 800,000. This is the point where retirement stops being a giant, vague fear cloud and starts being, statistically, very likely fine. And this is where the conventional story gets messy. You've probably heard some version of this. Save $1 million, withdraw 4% a year, and you're set. That idea comes from William Bengen, who studied retirement outcomes in 1994 and looked at rolling 30-year periods going back to the 1880s. He wanted to find a withdrawal rate that would survive the worst retirement timing in modern U.S. history. He found 4%. That was the floor, not the ceiling. And then the financial industry did what it always does with a conservative floor. It started treating it like the maximum allowed. That's useful, by the way. If you convince everyone they need way more money than they actually do, they keep saving longer, working longer, and paying fees longer. Not a conspiracy, just incentives. Now here's where the data gets fun. Magel-Kitzes looked at the same historical kind of data and found something that most people never hear. In more than half of those retirement scenarios, people following the 4% rule didn't just survive. They died with more than double their starting portfolio. So if someone retired with $800,000 and withdrew 4% a year, in a lot of historical cases, they ended up with over $1.60 million left at death. And in that data set, 0 of the 115 scenarios ended with the portfolio completely wiped out. 0. Even Bengen has adjusted his own thinking since then. His newer estimate is closer to 4.7% in current conditions. Kitzes' work points to an average closer to 6% in current conditions. 6%. On $800,000, that's $48,000 a year. Now add Social Security for a married couple, which today can land around $3,800 a month, or about $45,600 a year. Now you're looking at roughly $94,000 a year in household income. From $800,000. That's the part most people are not supposed to understand too clearly, because it changes the target. It means you do not necessarily need some dramatic 7-figure finish line to have a real retirement. You need the right withdrawal logic, the right account structure, and the nerve not to sabotage yourself. Let me show you what this looks like in real life. Take Sandra. She's 42, household income around $110,000. She's got $180,000 split between a 401k and a Roth IRA. She's contributing about $14,000 a year, and she feels behind. 12 years of doing the right thing, and it still doesn't look like retirement money. But here's her actual runway. At $180,000, with those contributions and 7% growth, she crosses $250,000 in less than 4 years. Then she keeps going. From there, it takes about 14 more years to reach $800,000. So Sandra is 56, not 65, with $800,000. Her Social Security benefit based on her earnings record might be around $2,200 a month. Her partners could add another $1,500. That's about $44,400 a year from Social Security. If she takes a 5% withdrawal from $800,000, that's another $40,000. Total annual income, about $84,400. And because she has some Roth exposure, her effective tax rate could be pretty low. So she may have replaced more than 75% of her working household income already, at $56. Not because she got lucky, because she understood the math and didn't sabotage. Below $250,000, you are the main engine. Contributions matter most. The mission is simple: save more, earn more, cut waste, capture the match, stop leaking cash everywhere. From $250,000 to $800,000. Compound growth starts carrying more weight. Your contributions still matter, but now optimization matters too. Fees matter, taxes matter, asset allocation matters. A 1% annual fee on $300,000 can quietly cost you around $170,000 over 30 years. That is not a tiny detail. Above $800,000, the fear usually becomes more psychological than mathematical. The danger shifts. It's less about running out and more about making bad choices because you're scared of running out. And that fear is profitable for a lot of people. I had a banker once pitch me a certificate of deposit at 0.5%, while inflation was running at 2.5%. He kept saying it was safe. Safe for who exactly? Guaranteed to lose purchasing power every year is not my idea of a win. He did not love that answer. We did not work together. Now, there's another story I need to tell you, because this is where a lot of people get trapped. I'm going to call him David. Very normal guy. Project manager. Mid-size manufacturing company. He hit $800,000 4 years ago. He had the math. His Social Security and his partner's Social Security totaled about $46,000 a year. A 5% withdrawal on $800,000 added another $40,000. So he was sitting at roughly $86,000 in annual retirement income. His working income was $90,000. Translation? He could have basically replaced nearly all of it and walked away. But David kept moving the target. First it was, I'll feel safe at $1 million. Then it was 1.2 million. Then 1.4. And now he's 62, still showing up on Monday mornings, still doing quarterly reviews, still trading away time he can never get back. For income, the math already cleared years ago. That's not rare. A lot of retirees underspend because the fear of running out is so loud they can't hear the numbers anymore. Studies keep showing that many retirees spend less than their own plans would allow, especially early on, just because they're afraid to touch the money. And the industry doesn't exactly rush to correct that fear. Why would it? A scared investor keeps money in managed accounts. A scared retiree buys products with fees and fine print. A scared worker keeps saving longer. More years of assets under management. More years of revenue. Again, not a conspiracy. Just incentives. Doing what incentives do. There's a reason this feels so intense. In high-altitude climbing, there's a stretch above 26,000 feet called the death zone. The body can't really survive there for long. And one of the weird things about that environment is that even smart, experienced climbers start making terrible decisions. That's retirement too. The moment the paycheck stops and the withdrawals begin, your brain can start acting like the money is disappearing faster than it is. The math might be perfectly fine. Your nervous system may not care. That's when people make emotional decisions that cost them years. So let's talk about the tax side, because this part is huge and most people leave it too late. Putting $800,000 in one traditional 401k is not the same as hitting $800,000 across a mix of account types. If everything is in a traditional account, every withdrawal is taxed as ordinary income. That can still work, sure, but it gives you less control. If you've built some Roth money too, now you have flexibility. You can choose which bucket to pull from. You can manage taxable income. You can potentially lower your tax bill in retirement in a meaningful way. And the key is this: you build that flexibility before you need it, not after. Because once the balance is already big and everything is in one bucket, your options get a lot less elegant. That's why Roth conversions can be powerful during lower income years. It's also why the default just put everything in the 401k, because that's what your employer set up is usually not the smartest long-term structure. It's convenient, sure. Convenient is not the same as optimal. Now, back to David for a second. He eventually did retire at 62. Not because he finally hit some magical number. Because his wife got a health diagnosis. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to make the choice obvious. He walked into his manager's office, turned in his notice, and left with $1.40 million. Combined Social Security was about $51,000 a year. A 5% withdrawal on $1.40 million added $70,000. That's $121,000 in annual income. His working salary had been $150,000. So yes, he replaced about 105% of his working income in retirement. And he could have done it 4 years earlier. He doesn't regret saving more. He regrets not understanding sooner that the math had already given him permission to stop. That's what fear does when nobody challenges it. So here's the real takeaway. First, stop treating $100,000 like the magic line. It's not. In today's world, the threshold where momentum starts beating raw effort is about $250,000. Below that, focus on savings rate and consistency. Above that, shift your attention to fees, taxes, allocation, and emotional discipline. Second, understand that the 4% rule is a floor, not a ceiling. It was designed to survive the worst historical conditions, not to describe the average outcome. In a lot of historical cases, retirees did much better than that. Third, build tax flexibility before you need it. A portfolio split across traditional, Roth, and maybe taxable accounts gives you more control, more efficiency, and more room to navigate retirement like an adult instead of like somebody guessing in the dark. So no, these numbers aren't magic, but they are honest. $250,000 is where the physics change. $800,000 is where the fear usually stops having a real mathematical argument. And if you understand those two numbers early, you can stop chasing fake finish lines and start making actual decisions, which is a lot more powerful than blindly following a retirement script from 30 years ago. The system will happily take your money, your time, and your working years while smiling the whole time. But now you know where the real checkpoints are.